Joining us now to break down the latest developments is House Prosecution Spokesperson Attorney Antonio Bucoy. Good morning. Welcome to Morning Matters.
Good morning and thanks for having me.
The Vice President has answered the Senate summons. She calls this impeachment case a scrap of paper. She pleads not guilty and she says this is a clear abuse of the impeachment process. No statements of ultimate facts are in the impeachment complaint.
Okay.
What does the prosecution have to say?
Let's break down your question. Number one, she said it's a mere scrap of paper. Did she say why? To us, the scrap of paper are the liquidation documents like piatos, boy camote. These are scraps of paper. The impeachment complaint embodies the ultimate and evidentiary material facts constituting the charges. And these are serious charges. Threatening the life of the President, the Vice President, and the Speaker of the House. Never before in the history of any country in the world has this been committed. Plunder, malversation, high crimes, betrayal of public trust. This cannot be considered as pamumulitika or persecution. Had she not committed these acts imputed to her, there won't be any complaint. Had she taken her oath when she was given the opportunity to explain this during the Quadcom hearings in the House of Representatives, we wouldn't have to go through this impeachment process. What's the other question?
Well, she says that there are no statements of ultimate facts.
Oh, these are all statements of ultimate facts and evidentiary facts. That's now the new requirement under the 2019 amendments to the rules of court. That not only do you allege the ultimate facts, meaning the material facts constituting the offense charged, but also evidentiary facts to ensure that these are not flimsy, these are not arbitrary, but this can be proven in court. These are all satisfied by the articles of impeachment.
Well, she had that Zoom press conference where she threatened to kill the president.
On live stream.
Does that hold as evidence?
Yes.
On the digital platform?
She's the worst witness. She's the best witness against herself, rather, not the worst witness. And she insisted, no joke, no joke. She stressed this not only once, but twice. And then she repeated this in a different occasion. If you will recall, there was another interview when she demonstrated how she would want to, or she imagined cutting the head of the president. So these are the confluence of all these actions are too blatant to be ignored. We cannot just brush this aside. The second highest official of the country making these threats is so gross that she should be made accountable among the other serious articles.
And the third thing that she said, that this was a clear abuse of the impeachment process. And of course, we do relate that with their camp saying that this was all political. Kumbaga, nagamit lang sa politika itong mga hearing na ito to get her out of office.
Kung nagamit lang ito sa politika, there won't be any evidentiary facts that had been laid down or laid out, or that were dug up during the Quadcom hearings. These are all based on documents, official documents at that. These are all based on testimonies of knowledgeable witnesses, some of whom are under the office of the Vice President or the office of the Secretary of Education. Hindi ito pamumulitika. Ang pamumulitika, you come up with a complaint from thin air, you cannot substantiate it, and you go to court. These are all based on evidentiary and testimonial, documentary and testimonial evidence.
Is the prosecution confident with the weight of evidence that it has?
Absolutely.
And when we say evidence, What evidence do you have exactly? Is it mainly on the confidential funds?
No.
Yung mga resibong nabanggit po nyo kanina, and also yung mga disbursements po niya, sabi po niya ito, no, Duterte said in an appeal that challenges the Commission on Audit's disallowance of the disbursements remains pending, and there's no final decision by the COA declaring the disbursements illegal and or unjustifiable. That's from the COA.
There has already been a disallowance by the COA. I think she should update herself with the status of
But has
the
there
process.
been a final decision by the COA
It tends.
on the actions of the Office
It
of Vice
tends.
President?
But we don't even have to wait for that. We don't have to wait for that. That is not a precondition for
Pero
the...
hindi po ba trabaho ng COA po yun para
Yes.
mag-imbestiga dito sa mga
And they have
confidential
investigated.
funds? Oo.
And they have disallowed it. There's a finding.
The notices of disallowance, you mean?
There is a disallowance, yes.
Which they asked the Vice President's office to explain, right? So the
Vice President already explained, and it has not been, that was not acceptable to COA. That's why there was a disallowance.
So there's a final decision already.
I think, yes, unless she appeals it.
What other evidence does prosecution have without preempting so much?
Yes, yes.
With what you can say?
The evidence of plunder, everything is on record. For instance, the amount of 112 million was disbursed in a span of 11 days without any explanation. The amount was handed over to 2 military men under her charge. Her instruction was for the disbursement officer to give it to them without an explanation, and she just did it. The amount vanished into thin air. So, like I said, without preempting what would go on to trial, let's leave it at that for now.
So the strongest case that the prosecution has would be on the confidential funds.
The strongest-
And the confidential fund use.
We have firmed up our evidence, so we're confident that in each and every article, we could secure a guilty verdict.
Buo na ho ba ang prosecution team?
Yes.
Ilan po ang miyembro?
We have in our team 12 public prosecutors. These are the congressmen, the lawmakers. Two did not, two unfortunately did not get re-elected, and they are now getting replaced
Dan
by
Fernandez?
yes,
And-
the incoming lawmakers, Chel Jokno, are coming in to join the team, plus Laila de Lima.
Sino po yung isa pang hindi na
I forgot. I mean, the names escape me now.
Congressman Abante.
No. Congressman is not with the prosecution team.
Okay.
On the part of the private prosecutors, there are about an equal amount of number, more or less.
So 24 for the
more or less, give or take.
prosecution team
Give or take.
versus the 16 of the defense.
This is not a question of numbers. It's a question of evidence.
But it really is reasonable to have that much lawyers because
It is.
it is a fact that's been thrown around,
It is.
taken against the Vice President, saying that she's
Yes.
guilty for having a lot of lawyers. So normal lang yun.
It is,
Sa ganito.
number one, you get a lot of lawyers because you can afford a lot of lawyers. That's the number one question. That's the number one circumstance. You may want to have a lot of lawyers, but you cannot afford them. You can afford only one or two. Then, apparently, obviously, she can afford 16. But let's not judge that. There are insinuations I've heard from some other sources that, the more lawyers you have, the more guilty you appear. Well, that may be right, that may be erroneous depending on...
Or reading too much into it.
Yeah, if you read too much into it. Same thing with the prosecution. It's not a question of numbers.
Okay, the Vice President's team has said that there are no articles of impeachment because these were referred back to the House of Representatives and they could not respond.
They're being literal about the return of the articles. That's a legal impossibility. The articles of impeachment remain with the Senate. It has neither been dismissed. It has not been, it has not been dismissed. So the articles remain in place.
With the Senate.
In the Senate and parenthetically,
But it has been sent back to remanded to
it is
the House
not
of
a
Representatives,
literal
right?
return, you know. It was returned because they imposed an unusual requirement, which is the certification that the House did not violate the Constitution.
That's the first one.
That's the first. And the second, an affirmation that the succeeding Congress, the 20th Congress, will pursue the articles of impeachment. These are all unusual requirements.
So what happens now? This will not proceed without the confirmation from the 20th
It will
Congress?
proceed. Like I said, I previously said, we are bending over backwards. The prosecution is bending over backwards. The House is bending over backwards. Notwithstanding the absurdity of the requirement, the House passed a resolution on the last day of plenary satisfying the
first
requirement.
Okay.
And given the current composition of the incoming Congress, the 20th, there's no doubt that the second condition would be
Hindi naman po
satisfied.
talaga magtutuloy, ano? Kasi wala ring plenary session sa ngayon. Tama po ba?
No.
Kumbaga parang pagkatapos po ng SONA, pagdating ng July, yun ang malamang yun ang unang pag-uusapan at isi-certify
Correct.
ng 20th Congress.
Hindi matutuloy not because the impeachment court is suspended. The impeachment court continues. Notwithstanding the Senate and Congress being on recess, awaiting the convening of the 20th Congress. Hindi siya susulong at this time because we cannot, as of yet, satisfy the second requirement, which is the affirmation that I spoke of. And that can be...
And what if they don't want to affirm that? What if they do not want to proceed and they deem this unconstitutional, crossing over to another Congress? What happens then?
The House of Representatives has no option but to proceed. They cannot withdraw. They cannot say, no, we don't want to pursue this. Their constitutional duty was performed and accomplished when they transmitted the articles. They cannot withdraw this. That is unconstitutional. That is beyond their mandate under the Constitution.
But what if Congress votes not to continue? What happens?
It is a constitutional impossibility. They cannot do it. So it's useless for us to
Pero marami rin pong nagawa na kumbaga, parang unconstitutional din. Yung pagde-delay.
But this is within the control of Congress. What you're pointing out are delays caused by the impeachment court and by the impeached official. Congress can never constitutionally withdraw the articles. It is not within their mandate. Their task, constitutional task, was performed when they transmitted.
So what if we change the term? What if it's not actually withdrawn, but the matter of the impeachment ends with the 19th Congress?
But that's not even an issue now.
So do you think everybody's on the same page?
We're on the same
that
page.
This will be carried over to the next.
This will be taken up by the succeeding Congress. And by Congress,
even the Senate is...
when I speak of Congress, I speak of the combined houses.
So everybody's on the same page?
Yes.
Na matutuloy po itong
Yes.
trial na ito? Okay.
This impeachment court has not said otherwise. In fact, they affirmed na we're not dismissing this.
I want to go to one of the main arguments of the Vice President, which is the one-year constitutional ban that the fourth impeachment complaint actually circumvented. She's arguing that the House Secretary General delayed transmittal of the first three impeachment complaints to the Speaker's office for 2 months, thus making it the fourth one unconstitutional. Or hindi po ba, paano po ba ma-justify ng House yung pagde-delay na yun?
The Secretary General has no deadline when to give it to the...
But...
Let me finish.
Okay, go ahead.
The Secretary General, there's no fixed period for him within which to submit this to the office of the Speaker. The Speaker of the House, on the other hand, has a 10-day deadline to refer this to plenary. Okay, that 10-day deadline with respect to the first three complaints fell within the 10-session day deadline. The first impeachment complaint was filed on December 2nd, 2024. The last impeachment complaint, which is the fourth, the one pending now, was filed on February 5. If the first impeachment complaint fell within the 10-day period, necessarily the two succeeding impeachment complaints that were filed by Makabayan and by the civil society, the clergy and the religious, fell within the 10-day session period. Okay? The fourth impeachment complaint did not have to go through referral to the Committee on Justice because it garnered more than the one-third minimum required. Such that the Constitution says once the endorsement of at least one-third is achieved, the complaint becomes the articles of impeachment. And this can be transmitted to the Senate as the articles of impeachment. So the 10-day session period was complied by not only by the first three complaints, but including the current fourth impeachment complaint, which is pending.
But doesn't it say in the Constitution that the SecGen should have transmitted the impeachment complaint to the Speaker's office immediately?
That is not in the Constitution.
Immediately?
That is not in the Constitution. It's in the House rules on impeachment. See, the House rules, the House has its own set of rules regarding impeachment proceedings. The Senate has their own own rules. The House is plenary when it comes to interpreting their own rules. That's part of their rule-making body, part of their internal rules. Not even the Supreme Court will intrude into that.
Kung baka kayo nag-uusap dyan.
No, yes.
Kung ano ibig sabihin ng immediately,
Just
para
like,
sa inyo, ay sa
yes,
inyo.
just like the internal rules of the Senate, we cannot intrude into that. We cannot interpret I mean, by we, I don't mean we, I mean the House.
Yeah, yes.
The House cannot intrude into that. And vice versa. In much the same way, in a line of decided cases, the Supreme Court will not intrude into the rule-making body, internal rule-making body of a co-equal branch of government, unless there are constitutional digressions.
What do you mean?
There are constitutional violations, but here there's none.
Because if you put it side by side with forthwith, right?
Oh yeah, but yeah, forthwith is in the Constitution. It's not just in the internal rules. So it's a constitutional mandate. You cannot ignore that.
So this will proceed.
This will proceed, absolutely, and it should. Because the institutions are on trial.
What do you make of the move of senator judges to file motions?
That has been discussed to death. Judges cannot do that. I'm sure you're referring to some of the...
Are you going to ask some senator judges to
recuse?
inhibit? Yeah.
No, we leave it to their judgment.
Hindi na.
Hindi na. That will...
Even if, I mean, the arguments of the Vice President in their response sound similar to the motions of some senators.
Listen. They say that the Vice President has the numbers. Okay? She has her own lawyers within the impeachment court. Legal, pundits say that. That being the case, why is she digressing from the factual allegations at hand? Why is she relying on procedural technicalities? If she thinks she has the numbers, she will be acquitted. So why don't you present your evidence? Right? Does that make sense?
What if the Supreme Court says that, or rules that this is unconstitutional?
Then,
could that ruling stop the trial?
The Supreme Court is the supreme arbiter.
But it is a co-equal branch, right?
Yes, but they're the final arbiter of constitutional questions. There are pending petitions now with the Supreme Court filed by the Vice President to stop the impeachment proceedings. They asked for a preliminary. They prayed for an injunction. It was not granted. They subsequently filed a supplemental petition. They sought the issuance of a TRO. Still no action.
At kasabay ho nito, biglang gumalaw po yung ombudsman, ano?
Yes.
Na sinasabi po sa Vice President na sumagot sila answering to these charges. And there's that whole debate. Senator Laila de Lima, former Senator Laila de Lima, expressed her concern.
Oh yeah. We are concerned.
About that office
We
na
are
baka
concerned.
ma-dismiss yung mga charges even before this trial is held.
No. The charges, you mean the charges in the impeachment court?
No.
What
the
charges?
The criminal case.
But the ombudsman cannot even intrude into this proceedings. He cannot initiate this preliminary investigation. Why? Under the Ombudsman Act, Republic Act 6770, there's a provision there that says the ombudsman can exercise disciplinary authority over public officials, elected, appointed, officials of government-owned and controlled corporations, officials of the LGUs, except impeachable officers. Except officers who can only be removed by impeachment. Members of members of the Congress are also excluded. The judiciary are also excluded. Why? There are independent mechanisms to discipline members of Congress.
Which is the impeachment
No.
process?
No. They have their own mechanism. They have their committee on, they have their ethics committee, their committee on discipline. So in other words, they have their own independent mechanism. Same with the Supreme Court. There's the Office of the Court Administrator that hears administrative cases against erring judges. But I'm referring in particular to officers who can be removed only by impeachment, like the Vice President. That's an exception to the rule that the Ombudsman exercises disciplinary authority. Okay? The only instance when the Ombudsman can conduct a preliminary investigation of an impeachable officer if it is for the purpose of filing a verified impeachment complaint, if warranted by the investigation. Why is this so? The Ombudsman is provided with reports of investigations conducted by the House apropos of government officials.
Which is binigyan nga po daw siya, di ba, na report.
Yes, that is the reason why.
Kaya niya binuksan ito na pinapasagot niya si
But that
VP.
is again overstretching his authority. He is provided reports occasionally, or if not regularly, by the committee or committees, respective committees of Congress, so that he could do an assessment on whether or not to pursue a complaint. Okay? But not with respect to impeachable officers. When he was given this report regarding the investigations conducted by the Quadcom, it was part of the, for your information, practice by the committees of the House of Representatives. It was not a complaint. It was unusual for him to treat this as a complaint and name Congressman Joel Chua as the complainant because he was the chairman. So he was also, caught about, why? I'm not a complainant.
So saan po niya, yung sinasabi po niyo na limitado ang kanyang kapangyarihan dito sa mga non-impeachable
Yes.
officers, saan po mahahanap po yan?
Nasa Republic Act 6770, the Ombudsman Act.
Okay.
This is the law that created the Ombudsman. This is the law that defined the powers
So
of the
what should
Ombudsman.
the Ombudsman do? What if he dismisses this?
He cannot.
He cannot.
He cannot. He should back off. Let the impeachment trial proceed. Because the mandate is, because the House of Representatives has the exclusive power to initiate
But if he
impeachment.
does pursue
He's liable
if he
for
does-
violating the law.
the prosecution, the trial will continue.
Trial will continue. He cannot stop this. He should back off. He should desist. That is that's the legal way of
We do know that the
responding to this.
Ombudsman, Samuel Martirez, is retiring this July. So
That even makes this interesting, considering his track record.
before the 20th Congress begins, does that happen before the Congress begins?
I think he retires sometime in mid-July. I'm not.
So that's before the
Yes.
20th Congress begins.
Yeah.
All right. Interesting developments here from different sides. But thank you so much for explaining all of that
Yes.
to us. So it's a very, very legalese and
I
technical
tried to translate
on many
it.
ends.
I tried to translate it in a language more digestible.
And is that your role here?
My role is to convey the message, to explain it.
Kasi hindi naiintindihan po ng Pilipino.
We have to make them understand. We have to insist that the public should understand.
Ano po ba dapat namin maintindihan ng publiko?
Maintindihan ano
Dito sa matter of impeachment.
dapat maintindihan ng publiko, ano ang proseso ng impeachment. Ito ay mekanismo ng ating saligang batas para sa pananagutan. Kaya yung titulo niya, the title is Accountability of Public Officers. What's the first item? Impeachment. The process was defined. The process was laid out. Mahalaga ito, this is not just a political exercise. It is not a political exercise. It is an exercise for holding a public official, the highest public officials, accountable.
Nung nilapitan po kayo, ano pong sinabi po nila? Your role, hindi po ba naiintindihan ng Pilipino yon? If you take a look at the recent results of the elections, it seems to be that impeachment did not really come across very well. And it was, to my interpretation, was seen as politicking.
I wouldn't say it was seen as politicking, perhaps to some people, but it was not in the platform by any of the candidates. So how can it be discussed? Wala sa plataforma ng kahit sinong kandidato eh.
Iniwasan.
Hindi sa iniwasan kasi ang politics sa Pilipinas is personality-based, not platform-based. I don't know if you'll agree with that. But that's how I see it. Why is it personality-based? That's the only reason we get actors elected into office. It is personality-based. It's name recall.
And yet, the Duterte camp was seen as saying, puro politika lang iniisip ito. Distraction to sa mga pagtaas ng bilihin, sa budget, sa paglulustay ng budget, sa kakulangan sa edukasyon.
That's a warrantless generalization. Pag wala kang matuhog na particular, i-generalize mo. You confuse the public. You smoke screen.
Pero bakit nga ba hindi inimbestigahan ng Office of the President pagdating sa paggamit naman ng confidential funds? Yun din ang kanilang isinasambit.
Hindi naman trabaho. Well, you mean by the Office of the President, you mean the...
Mas maraming confidential funds ang Office of the President.
The President is not on trial here. That's a separate issue that we should deal with. Hindi ho yan. Huwag natin ihahalo dito yan. Again, that's bemuddling the issue eh. Ang nasasakdal dito ay ang pangalawang pangulo. Huwag nating guluhin. Kasi if we start finger pointing, mas malaki tinanggap nun, mas malaki ginasunod. Kayong lahat. Teka muna, ikaw ang nasasakdal eh. Sagutin mo ito. Ba't mo ihahambing ang sarili mo sa ibang tao? Sasabihin mo, hindi, mas malaki kinuha niya kaysa akin. So that makes it right? Does that make it right? No. Ang nagnakaw. Ang dapat managot. Kaya piso yan o hindi. Kung naaalala nyo, may isang maestra, isang guro, na nakadispalko ng 5,000. 5,000. Kinonvict. Ikinulong. Ito 612 million. Pag hindi ka naman ng gigil, where's the fairness there? Sa halagang 5,000, ikinulong mo,
Hindi po ba
kinonvict
ganun
mo?
din ang ginagawa sa budget natin? Na pinapasukan ng maraming insertion sa ayuda?
Ibang usapin yan. Hindi dapat natin ihalo dito yan. Ang usapin ngayon ay ang pagpapanagot sa pangalawang pangulo. Ito may ebidensya. Hindi ito haka-haka eh. We're not second-guessing here. Yung mga appropriation, maraming explanation, maraming haka-haka. Magpapagulo yan ang usapin na ito. Dito tayo tumutok. Ito muna. Ito ngayon ang is on the table. Ito yung pag-usapan natin.
Pumasok po kayo sa gitna ng kaguluhan. Para po sa mga nagtataka, saan ang galing si Atty. Bucoy?
Kung ito yung kapalaran, edi so be it. Kung makakatulong ako sa proseso, tinatanggap po ang responsibilidad.
Have you heard of, possible spokesperson for the defense?
No, wala akong
Wala. Kayo lang.
Wala akong naririnig. Wala akong naririnig.
Okay.
And it
We shall
doesn't
know.
matter. Actually, it doesn't matter. Ang importante is my message. Ang importante is for me to educate the public, to understand this process.
What will be the role of Shell Jokno and Laila de Lima here?
They will be part of the prosecution group.
Will they be, how will the roles be designated?
We are still discussing this on where they will fit,
Oo.
which articles they will take care of.
So, ma-assign po yung several lawyers per article impeachment.
Yes, that's the
Of
general
impeachment.
idea. That's the general idea.
How many lawyers per article of impeachment?
I don't have the exact numbers, but at least 2 per
At least
article.
2.
At least.
And will we be hearing from them in this trial?
Oh, yeah.
For sure.
For sure. Yeah, for sure.
Okay. All right. We will hopefully we get to that trial, as you mentioned,
We will and we should. We will and we should.
this coming July.
Yes.
Given all of the extraordinary developments over in the House of Representatives and the Senate. In the meantime, maraming salamat. We have the spokesperson for the prosecution panel in the upcoming impeachment trial, Attorney Antonio Bucoy.